Welcome to the Leading Owls podcast, brought to you by Rice University's Doerr Institute for New Leaders. Each week, we bring you inspiring stories and practical tips from successful student leaders, faculty, and staff, along with leadership experts and coaches that will help guide you in your own leadership journey. Today on the Leading Owls podcast, we're joined by Dr. Bernie Banks, director of the Doerr Institute for New Leaders at Rice University, retired U.S. Army Brigadier General, and one of the authors of the new book, The New Science of Momentum. Bernie has spent his career developing leaders in the military, business, and higher education. And in this conversation, he shares insights from the book, his own leadership journey, and why momentum is such a powerful force for individuals and organizations alike. Please welcome Bernie. Hi, Bernie. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, it's wonderful to be here today with you, Kelly.
So for listeners who haven't read it yet, what is The New Science of Momentum about, and what inspired you and your co-authors to write it?
So the book is simply a how-to guide, if you would, on actions leaders can take to generate positive momentum within their teams and organizations, or to reverse negative momentum within their teams or organizations. And the genesis for the book came as the result of a remarkable turnaround in a Super Bowl. In 2017, the Atlanta Falcons were playing the New England Patriots in the Super Bowl in football. And in the third quarter, the Atlanta Falcons were winning 28-3. And the odds makers said the chance of the Falcons prevailing in the game was over 99%. People weren't even paying attention to the game anymore. And then through a series of small actions that started to stack up, the Patriots started clawing their way back, ultimately winning the game. And everybody was like, wow, how could that have transpired? That was amazing. And so my co-author, Don Yeager, who's a 12-time New York Times bestselling author and a former associate editor for Sports Illustrated, he went back to his office after the game and he wrote a question on the board. How does a moment become momentum? And that started a process of exploration regarding this topic. Was momentum real? If so, what does it take to shape it effectively? Along the way, he started interviewing leaders from across a variety of sectors, and then asked me to join in the project. And so together, we explored this topic looking at 4 different areas: business, politics, sports, and the military. We interviewed over 250 leaders from across those areas, also gave out thousands of surveys, and we distilled all the insights gleaned from those leaders into a model that's contained in the book. And that's how the project got started.
That was such a great way to start the book. I mean, that took me right back to watching that game. I think that's the hardest part for me and so many people is starting when there's zero momentum, because the Patriots had nothing at that point. I mean, they literally had nothing. No one thought they could get it back. And so starting, when you have no momentum, I think that's what I find the hardest thing.
Yeah. The bottom line is leaders are responsible for generating momentum within their teams and organizations. It's part of their core charter. How do we get people moving in the right direction at the right pace in order to achieve the right things? And when you are starting from zero, that can seem like a daunting task, but there are actions we can take that amplify the likelihood of success. And every leader we talked to said, yes, we believe in this. Yes, I thought very intently about this. And yes, this is something that can be manipulated and extended over time.
You describe momentum as a powerful force in organizations and in individuals. How do you define momentum in the context of leadership?
I really talk about it from the perspective of it's a mindset. It's a belief. It's a belief that either we are progressing in the right direction or we're not progressing in the right direction. And that belief is powerful because it then informs one's motivation, and motivation affects 3 things: direction, effort, and persistence. And so if you can create a belief that, yes, things are on our side, we're making progress, and it elevates one's motivation. And so you're willing to work harder and to work longer in order to achieve your outcome. But if you think the cards are stacked against you, things just aren't going your way, it's a leader's obligation to figure out how can we turn around that mindset, because that mindset is going to inform people's actions, which is why this topic is so important, because leaders, by their very charge, are challenged to produce change. Leaders are agents of change. And as agents of change, learning how to make that change positive through generating momentum is absolutely essential.
This book deals with the science part of momentum. What does that mean, and what research or evidence grounds your ideas in that?
Well, we draw from a variety of disciplines, whether it's psychology, physics, engineering. I mean, we pull broadly to help people have an understanding of what are those forces at play and how do you shape those forces, if you would. So if you're thinking about classic momentum, we think about things like mass times velocity, things like that. But more broadly, just what does it take to get something either rolling forward, or what does it feel like when something's rolling towards you? You don't feel like you can stop it. We've all been in one of those situations before. And so we draw from a variety of disciplines from a scientific perspective to help provide more context around the topic.
What are the most common, or one or a few of the most common mistakes leaders make that stop momentum?
One, missing the moment. So, we call, as part of our model, the set of activities or events that create an opportunity, we call that the spark. There are many times individuals aren't cognizant of the presence of a spark. And by the time they figure out that an opportunity did exist, it has passed them. So that's number one, failing to recognize the spark. Number two, ineffective communications, not being able to build upon the spark through effective communication. And then the last thing is recognizing that momentum is something that has to be continually nurtured. So you might be doing certain things for a certain period of time, but then you aren't intent on continuing to build upon that. And so it kind of just peters out, which is why one of the most important components of the model is what we call preparation. What are those efforts that you undertake in service of generating a spark, not simply hoping you run into a spark?
How can leaders intentionally build momentum in situations where energy is just, there's no energy and progress is stalled?
I think this goes back to, in the model, this notion of preparation. So what are those activities you're undertaking in service of creating the conditions for good things to happen? A lot of folks think about momentum as if it's something they don't control. It's just something that happens to them. And when the conditions aren't right for a spark to occur, you have to go back to, well, what are we doing to generate a spark as opposed to simply hoping we encounter a spark? Preparation matters. And so if you take the story of like NVIDIA, they didn't just stumble into the position they're in right now. They took a look at emerging areas of research, and they recognized that there will come a point in time, we don't know when, but we know it will happen, when the computing power necessary to make these areas of research viable will require very powerful chips, what we call GPUs, graphic processing units. And so they started working on those graphic processing units well in advance. And once breakthroughs in research occurred that then could be facilitated through the use of these very powerful chips, boom, the company just skyrockets in terms of value. So they didn't just get lucky. They took a look at what the future was going to require, and they said, well, now, how do we start working on helping to make that future a reality? And so it was through preparation that they put themselves in that position. And I think leaders are always looking at, effective leaders, what are those efforts we need to undertake now so that when tomorrow occurs and sometime within tomorrow an opportunity presents itself, we are prepared to seize upon that opportunity. That's what the good ones do. They're always thinking about the preparatory efforts. And then when the spark happens, they amplify it through communications. They foster positive team climate. They continue to communicate effectively to help people to understand, here's what's next. Here's why that matters. Here are the actions we're going to have to take in order to continue to sustain the momentum going forward.
Are there practical tools or frameworks from the book that students and emerging leaders at Rice could use right away?
Oh, absolutely. The book is geared around a model. So in the model, you'll see that everything starts with leadership. So leaders provide clear direction, they gain alignment, and they sustain commitment in order to make sure things transpire over time. So the process starts with, are you leading effectively? Then, how do you, on your team or within your organization, build the right norms? We call that culture. So what are those norms, values, beliefs that you're reinforcing so that people understand the importance of behaving in a certain way as they conduct their affairs? From there, you move to preparation. Preparation always matters. What are you doing to build the prospect of generating the spark? The spark is the moment. It's not a singular thing. Sometimes it'll be a set of things that happen together. Sometimes those little small wins, we call them stackables. And so they start stacking up and you recognize, boom, this is an opportunity. What are we going to do with it? From the spark, you then go into things like, all right, effective communications, team climate, belief and mindset, and then feedback. Because as we continue to undertake these efforts, how are we doing? Are we sustaining the momentum? Are we building even greater momentum? Or are things starting to back off? Born out of that feedback, you go back into that cycle and continue to focus on those activities that are necessary to sustain the momentum. And so that model can be applied by anyone to anything. You can apply it to your family. How am I leading my family? What are those norms, values, beliefs we foster in our family? If we want to create an opportunity for our kids to go to a great college, what are the preparatory efforts that are taking place? And what's that spark that tells us we're on the right track? Whether it's, boom, we got great test scores, or, we just got this mark of distinction at school. How do we build on that to create an even more compelling opportunity going forward? Communicating, here's what's working, here's what's not working. Fostering an environment where people are free to share their perspectives, and then stirring that belief and mindset. You can do this. We can prevail. We were built for this. And then taking a look at the feedback loop. So you can apply this in your personal life. You can apply it in your professional life.
Your own career has spanned the military, academia, and leadership development. How have those experiences shaped the way you think about momentum?
I think we're all a product of our experience and the experiences that we adopt from others. And so when thinking about my career, one of the interesting fun facts is that in every role I've occupied since graduating college, I've led a team. Every single role. And so in leading those teams, I most certainly have experienced things where I felt the wind was at our back. I've experienced what it's like when we have significant headwinds. I've experienced what it's like when it feels like the wind is coming at you from every direction. And regardless of the circumstances, I've been tasked, along with those I work alongside, to figure out how do we generate positive momentum in service of accomplishing our assigned mission. And so I've learned a lot about what does it take to do that well. I've got my ways in which I go about it, but I'm also desirous of learning how others have gone about it so I can add their insights to my own. And so whether it was competitive sports, whether it was the military, whether it was formal study, all of that has allowed me to put my own experience into better context and to devise better experiments along the way because I'm integrating new things into my process.
Looking back, was there a moment in your career when you personally experienced the power of momentum, either the rock going up the hill or coming back at you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. One experience that comes to mind was when I was serving as the general manager of one of the 14 business units in the United States Army that operates the Apache helicopter. When I had taken over that unit for the key indicators we use to measure organizational effectiveness, the unit was in the bottom third globally. And people's attitudes about life in the unit were kind of so-so. They just weren't intent on trying to be the best at what they were doing. They were just happy to be getting by. Now, what was going on in the world at that time? There's a lot of turmoil because this is post 9/11. The U.S. is involved in significant activities in the Middle East, and units were being asked to go to the Middle East on a regular cadence. The unit I was leading had not taken on that challenge yet, and they were of the belief that they weren't asked to be involved in that challenge. I had a different mindset. I thought, yes, they're going to ask this organization to go at some point, and we need to get ready for that. And so as we started the turnaround effort, it was just going slow. And at one point, probably around 10 months into my tenure, we had a fairly significant truck accident. Fortunately, nobody was harmed, but we lost a lot of organizational equipment in the process. And we kind of used that to say, what will it take for us to change how we're behaving? We don't know when we're going to get the call, but if we were to get the call today, this tells us we're not ready. And when you go to combat, you can't make things up on the fly. And so what is it going to take for us to start preparing properly so that we can be at our best, so that if the call comes, we're prepared and we can go and fight and defeat our adversaries and do so while bringing all of our people home safely. And so we changed our preparation efforts. We were really hammered down on what's the culture we require. I had to replace some leaders that weren't committed to going through this process. And then at a certain point, we conducted a major exercise and we excelled in that exercise. And that was the spark. People are starting to believe, oh my gosh, we could really make this turnaround effort possible. And so we kept building on that. We're like, take a look at that activity, everything that went into it. Now, what's it going to take for us to get to the next level? So we kept amplifying through communications the importance of honor the basics, excel at the basics, preparation matters. We kept fostering an environment that says we take care of one another along the way. So we had a positive team climate. And then when people started believing in the power of what we were doing, long story short, because of having generated that momentum and built upon it, that unit went from the bottom third globally to where it was designated number one globally.
Wow.
But initially, the momentum, when I took over, was absolutely headed in the wrong direction. By the end of my tenure, and I'm not here to assert that everything that transpired was a function of my efforts. It was absolutely not. It was a collective endeavor. But we absolutely generated positive momentum that resulted in our skyrocketing in terms of overall competence and overall collegiality. And it was reflected ultimately in that unit being designated number one.
That's amazing. That's really, really cool.
Well, they were amazing. I wasn't amazing, but they were amazing. I had some amazing colleagues. I think very fondly on that time in my life, and I'm grateful to all those who are willing to expend their energy as part of that effort.
How do you see your role as director at the Doerr Institute?
Best job in the world. I love it. I love it. I have amazing colleagues like you. And so, coming to work every day is something that excites me immensely. But, one of the things that we're responsible for doing at the Doerr Institute is generating positive momentum at Rice University with respect to highlighting the importance of investing in every single student's development as a leader. Students are really busy at Rice. They're classic overcommitters, and they work really hard. Given that reality, we have to fight for the precious resource that is their time. And so through our marketing efforts, through the quality of our programs, and through highlighting why leader development matters, we're trying to continue to build that positive momentum that will allow Rice students to excel out in the real world as leaders because they've made the investments in their leadership capabilities during their time at Rice. And so I think we've demonstrated that we have positive momentum on our side because the total number of students that continue to engage in our programs is increasing every year. The overall quality of our programs, as determined by the students, is universally high. And our ability to measure the outcomes associated with our programs, we do it empirically, and the empirical research suggests we're doing it at a very high level. And so I would say that the momentum the Doerr Institute is experiencing right now as part of the broader Rice community is most certainly headed in the right direction.
Well, that's excellent to hear. I certainly feel like it is. What was it like, going back to the book really quick, what was it like collaborating with your co-authors on a book? And did that process teach you anything new about momentum?
Oh, it taught me a lot. For years, people had been asking, Bernie, do you have a book? Are you interested in writing a book? And my answer was always, I would be open to the prospect of writing a book. I haven't started writing a book, and there are a lot of things I don't know about what it would take to write a book. Now, the nice thing is when you work with someone like Don, who's written over 50 books,
wow,
once again, is a 12-time New York Times best-selling author. He knows everything there is to know about that process. How do you take an idea, turn it into a gallery? Name your thing. How do you structure it? How do you pressure test it? And so being invited into the project with somebody of his stature was fascinating for me. And it's a very collaborative endeavor. So you have this basic premise that you're trying to flesh out, but you also have to remain open to new ideas, changing how you thought you were going to craft something. And so the way we kind of divvied up the work, I was primarily the science guy. So how do you bring in empirical research to support the assertions you're making? Don was primarily the storyteller. He's a world-class storyteller. He's amazing in his ability to write compelling stories. And then jointly, we worked on how do we take what we've learned from these interviews with these leaders and look for themes and kind of distill that into something that we can easily explain to others. And so we jointly developed the model, and it was iterative in nature. The model changed many times over. Don came up with the initial model, but then we changed that model multiple times based on what we were hearing from the leaders we were dialoguing with. And we were very quick to say, hey, it's a model, not a theory. Theories are predictive and models are descriptive. So we acknowledge, hey, this is a model. It describes insights we've gleaned from others, but it doesn't guarantee a certain outcome. But we do believe, based on the research and based on the insights, that if you use this model effectively, it is highly likely to raise the probability of you getting a successful outcome. And so that process was time-consuming. It was interesting. It was exciting. And it most certainly was illuminating. We learned a lot along the way. The book was not simply us sharing our thoughts, even though our thoughts went into the book. The book was really about distilling the experiences of others, trying to make those themes very clear, and then sharing those insights with our readers.
What role does failure or setback play in creating momentum? And can losing it actually spark more progress?
I think many times the most inspired actions are the result of setbacks. When something really matters to you and you encounter a roadblock, it becomes a moment of reflection that can turn into opportunity because of the challenge you've just been presented. And many of our leaders highlighted that the momentum they were required to generate came as the result of something not having transpired favorably for them. Words have meaning, and I try not to use the word failure. I do use the word challenge a lot. When you are challenged and you are presented a setback, that also creates an opportunity. And so momentum frequently springs forth from some sort of significant challenge or setback. Because when you have that setback, it doesn't necessarily mean that, whoa, I've got all this negative momentum I'm dealing with. It could mean we're just static. However, the setback could also mean you're dealing with negative momentum. So it doesn't have to be that you've now got this tsunami of things that are going against you. It's just that at this moment in time, we didn't get what we were aiming for. And so what do we do with that? However, certain setbacks can be reflective of negative momentum stacking up against you over time. Either one, whether you're dealing with negative momentum or you've just had a setback at a moment in time, both create an opportunity for you to ask yourself, what will we do now? And for the most resolute leaders, they acknowledge what has transpired. They paint a compelling picture of what can transpire, and then they galvanize people's willingness to embark on that journey.
That reminds me of my teenager. I'm trying to teach him how to take those setbacks, those challenges.
It's not easy. It's not easy because some people, they look at it and they start to say, well, that setback is starting to define how they think of self. I've always been told it's not the fact that you experience a setback. What ultimately matters is what's your response to the setback. You know, the setback is not what defines you. It's how you respond. That's a reflection of your character and your commitment. For teenagers who had their hearts set on something, all of a sudden they don't get it and they believe it's the end of the world. You're like, guess what? It's a big world. You can push through this. And what you will experience if you're truly committed to saying, if this isn't what I want, how hard are you willing to work for the thing that you do want? Those are the conversations that matter as a parent. Because if you can get them to really buy into that, then they'll soar. They'll soar.
Yes. Not making the golf team in 10th grade is not the end of it all.
It's not, but it stings.
Yeah.
It stings if you love golf. My son in high school loved basketball, still loves basketball. And he had just the lot in life whereby the kids on the high school team had been playing AAU and league ball together since they were little. And now, they rise up to high school and these kids are really good. And, his junior year, they're second in the state. Senior year, they make the state finals. One of the kids went off on a D1 scholarship to Princeton.
Wow.
And so that was just his lot in life. He couldn't make that team. He couldn't make that team because those kids were, I said, but that doesn't mean you have to give up your love of the game. It doesn't mean that, somehow that defines you as a loser or anything. That just meant that was not your opportunity to put your unique stamp on a team. But if you're really committed to saying, okay, how do I catch up to those folks? Because he hadn't played competitive basketball through all his years. He had played in the backyard. He had played through friends with pickup games. That's different than playing on competitive teams. he did not have the experience of playing on competitive teams. So you pose a question to him, what will it take? So in college, he committed himself to playing intramurals for his fraternity, and he played all 4 years. Through getting more reps in and everything, he was able to start playing on higher level teams within the university competitively. And he became kind of known amongst the intramural crowd for his basketball acumen. And so the setback he had in high school didn't define him, but it did kind of light a fire under him. Like, okay, you say that these folks don't see something that you have. Well, go show somebody. Don't just talk about it. Go do it. And so college intramurals was the way in which he was able to do that. And he thoroughly enjoyed himself while he was doing it.
I love that. If you had to give students one piece of advice about creating momentum in their personal or academic lives, what would that be?
Remain optimistic. Momentum is a belief set. It's a mindset. If you want to have the prospect of creating it, don't work against yourself. Belief and mindset matters.
Simple yet true. Very, very true. And finally, when you think about your own next chapter, what momentum are you hoping to create moving forward?
I think it's clear that my next chapter just involves trying to help as many people as possible on the journey to leading their lives well. And so whether it's through my activities at the Doerr Institute, whether it's through my activities at home or in the community, whether it's through my activities with organizations that I'm privileged to engage in a consultative capacity, just continuing to pour my energy into helping others live their lives more effectively, because that's the essence of leadership. So that's what I see myself doing going forward.
Well, we're so excited to see what's going to happen here at Rice with the Doerr Institute and everything else. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's been wonderful to be here.
Thank you for joining us for the Leading Owls podcast. We will be back next week with more leadership journeys and tips to share. New episodes release each Wednesday. For more information on the Doerr Institute for New Leaders and our free leader development programs for Rice students, please visit doerr.rice.edu.